Hello, my name is Michael Hooper, and this is my review of Mark Lanegan's memoir, Sing Backwards and Weep. Mark Lanegan's memoir, Sing Backwards and Weep, is a gripping story of a heroin addict musician struggling to find his way out of darkness. Lanegan was the lead singer of Seattle grunge band Screaming Trees and a prolific solo artist and collaborator with other musicians including Isobel Campbell and Moby. His solo work could be described as a haunting Leonard Cohen. He is America's equivalent to French poet Charles Baudelaire. He is influenced by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, the Velvet Underground, Gun Club, David Bowie, The Saints, Joy Division, and Lou Reed. Mark Lanegan died on February 22nd, 2022 at age 57 of undisclosed causes. He had struggled with COVID-19 and wrote a book about his experience called Devil in a Coma while living in Ireland with his wife. In Sing Backwards and Weep, published in April 2020, Lanegan is stripped bare. He seems to hold nothing back. At various times in his life, he was a porn addict, a whore willing to have sex with just about any woman. He suffered multiple sexually transmitted diseases. He was a liar, a cheat, a thief, a drug dealer, and a man driven by revenge who fought with his own bandmates and with strangers who pissed him off, and sometimes with other musicians. He seemed heartless at times, yet there was a deep, profound sorrow and agony at moments in his life when he realized how many people he had hurt. His voice is throaty and damaged. He sounds like he is going to cry when he speaks. He shares the needle with Kurt Cobain of Nirvana. One time, Kurt and Mark went to an ATM together, and Kurt withdrew several thousands of dollars from various bank accounts, kept a couple $100 for himself, and gave the rest of the money to Mark because Kurt said you could use it. Another time, Mark needed a fix in Denver where he was stuck in a snowstorm. Kurt sent him some heroin inside of a coffee bag, but the snowstorm prevented quick delivery. Mark Lanegan grew up in Ellensburg, a small town in Washington state, where he started drinking and became an alcoholic by age 12. He had a terrible relationship with his mother. His father let him do whatever he wanted, but warned him that his rebellion was going to lead to a life of struggle and hardship. Mark did all kinds of drugs, but used heroin to get off alcohol. In 1984, he joined guitarist Gary Lee Conner, bassist Van Conner, and drummer Mark Pickerel to form Screaming Trees. He saw the band as his way out of the small town. He often fought with members of the band about the direction of the music and eventually won out as the lead singer and main songwriter. They moved to Seattle and became relatively successful, but never as big as Nirvana or Soundgarden or Alice in Chains, which were contemporaries. Nevertheless, Screaming Trees performed at concerts and festivals over the years, often with other grunge bands in the United States and Europe. Perhaps the most challenging thing in his life was finding heroin in order to avoid dope sickness. Without a fix, a heroin addict gets really sick and starts throwing up and suffers diarrhea as the body works to eliminate all these toxins. The only way to stop dope sickness is to get another fix. Lanegan was given a limit of about $200 a day while on tour, and he spent most of it on heroin. I'd say more than a third of the book is devoted to his struggles to score drugs. There are so many missed opportunities in his life because of heroin. He turns down a chance to provide the music for a movie in Massachusetts because he is afraid he can't find heroin there. Perhaps the most harrowing tale of scoring drugs is when he's in Europe and he's suffering from dope sickness and needs a fix in Amsterdam. He goes out at 2 a.m. to a square where drugs are sold. He buys some dope, but when he returns to the hotel, he finds out it's fake. So now he needs more money. He pounds on the door of the merchandise sellers and asks them for money, and they threaten to call the cops, but finally give him two 50-pound notes for his share of the merchandise. He then goes back to the same square to buy drugs, but two people rob him at knife point and take all his money. You would think at this point he would just give up, but no. He takes a cab back to the hotel and fights with the cabbie over his lack of cash to pay him. Inside the hotel, he finds out at the front desk that he's been authorized to charge up to 500 guilders on a credit card. So he takes the money, pays the disgruntled cabbie, grabs another cab, and goes back to the same square to find heroin. No one is there, and he begins wandering the streets of Amsterdam. A strange sounding person on a bicycle comes toward him. Mark asks him if he has any heroin, and sure enough, the guy does. Lanegan needs to do a shot right now. The Dutchman locks his bike and sees an unlocked bike and steals it and takes it up 5 flights of stairs to his apartment. When they enter the apartment, he throws the bicycle on a pile of bikes. Lanegan is by now in full dope sickness and vomiting in a trash can while suffering from diarrhea on the toilet. The Dutchman prepares the heroin for him to shoot up. While sitting in the stranger's toilet, he shakily finds a vein and shoots the heroin into his bloodstream, and for the first time in over a week, he begins to feel well. The book includes a funny story about a Swedish fan who is pompous and entitled. He parties with her and her friend, but didn't really like her for her better-than-thou attitude. On a second occasion, he was doing heroin with a couple of friends. They'd washed their needles in a tall glass of water. When she burst into the room, she said she was extremely thirsty and saw this tall glass of reddish water and guzzled it down in one full sweep. It took all of his might to keep from bursting out in laughter, but they laughed about that for many days afterwards. The book includes his encounters with musicians like Bernard Sumner of Joy Division and New Order, Johnny Marr of the Smiths, and encounters with Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings. Courtney Love pays for much of his rehab in California. The book ends with the news that his longtime friend and co-drug user Lane Staley of Alice in Chains has died from a speedball drug overdose. In the book's dedication, Mark writes, "For Tony and all my other absent friends." Tony is Anthony Bourdain, who encouraged him to write. Mark Lanegan's life reminds me of the drug addicts I knew as a teenager. Excuse me. They seemed at first like loyal friends when we would score a bag of weed together, get high, and listen to music. But sometimes they would steal from me, or one time a thug just beat me up because I didn't get him high. As a drug dealer, Mark would sometimes burn his source, steal the dope, and keep it for himself. One of his sources threatened to kill him. I learned the hard way. I had to get rid of these terrible druggy friends to find people I could trust. I also am greatly disturbed by all the self-torture in the book. He's throwing up, he's cold, he's got the chills, and yet he still does more heroin. One time his arm swells up from an infection, and doctors consider cutting his arm off. All this self-torture says one thing: stay away from heroin. Sure, Mark was the exception in terms of production. He wrote and performed high and seemed to do okay, but his life was a living hell, and most people are not productive on drugs. Here's some of the lyrics from Mark's song, I Wouldn't Want to Say. I wouldn't want to say, my friend, so I'm not saying anything. You say you'll fall, I'll fall lower. A love letter was what I meant, a bullet to the heart was sent. The way my body lay here bent in the freezing exposure and frozen to colder, I wouldn't want to say, no, I wouldn't want to say. Get out of here while you can, get out of here while you can. I will bring bad luck and misery to you, man. I'll paint this shadow across your land while putting something graveyard dark straight into your hand. I wouldn't want to say, I wouldn't want to say. Finally, there are some sad, haunting sounds generated by Mark Lanegan. Search him out on YouTube, and you will find his music. I learned a lot from this book, mainly for what it's like for a heroin addict. It's a frightening experience. Well, this concludes my discussion of Mark's book. Thank you, and I wish you well.